Typically the one female character left at the end of a film, and often the one who either confronts the main villain, lives to tell the tale, or both if she's lucky, the final girl's role in horror has expanded so far over the past couple of decades that it's kind of come round again in a horseshoe shape. And what do we mean, you ask? Well, now she's sometimes the villain too. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture here with 10 horror movies where the final girl was the villain. Before we start, here is your spoiler warning. Proceed with caution, there are spoilers ahead. Number 10, Kate in Cube 2 Hypercube. While neither as artistic, original, nor dedicated to the craft of horror movie making as Vincenzo Natali's Cube, Cube 2 Hypercube is nevertheless precisely the kind of conceptually OTT nonsense that keeps series like this fun for as long as they last. Where the first film cut its teeth on a pre-Saw-like premise, a group of strangers go from room to room navigating various sensor-activated machine-based traps, Cube 2 deals in traps spanning the gamut of time, space, and reality, all contained within a nifty and overwhelmingly humongous tesseract. Among the structure's apparent victims is Kate Fillmore, a psychotherapist and empathetic character whose attempts to broker peace and caution against more rash and extreme moves leaves her the only one still breathing by the end of the film. Well, that and a whole lot of espionage. Kate is in fact an operative working for Izon, a faceless defense contractor who sent her in to get the information they needed from a fugitive inside the Tesseract, her survival all but assured from the beginning. Thus, Kate is both final girl and villain. But the real villain is capitalism, right? Right? Number 9, Rocky in Don't Breathe. Fede Alvarez's Don't Breathe proved that the Evil Dead director was more than just a flash in the pan when it came to subtly reinventing the horror wheel, and that his star Jane Levy could act right across the spectrum of parts. Enter Rocky, a good-for-nothing down and out who works with a small crew turning over private homes and fencing as much jewelry and other valuables as they can carry or hawk. Unfortunately, petty theft and moral scruples do not often go hand in hand, and soon she is party to the robbery of an old blind Vietnam War veteran's house after receiving a tip that he has $300,000 in cash in his house out in the middle of a conveniently derelict Detroit neighborhood. But just because you start out as the villain doesn't mean you have to end up as one. The vet in question is tough as nails Norman Nordstrom, and the woman he received his $300,000 settlement from after she killed Norman's daughter in a car accident is chained up in his basement, pregnant. Like an evil daredevil, Norman uses his heightened senses to take Rocky's crew apart one by one, and it is only through dumb luck and perseverance that Rocky makes it out alive with Norman's money. Number 8, Danny in MidSummer. MidSummer follows a group of American uni students as they join the locals to participate and study a midsummer festival that occurs only once every 90 years. Among them is Danny, the film's hard-done-by protagonist who is recovering from the triple murder-suicide of her parents and sister and contending with a boyfriend who doesn't want anything to do with her. The commune community get progressively stranger as the festival goes on, with the serving of human pies, the bashing of their elders' skulls, and a collective way of processing grief that is as creepy as it is bizarre. Oh, and they kill all the visitors. Except for Danny. Going the distance and coming out on top, Danny finds herself changed by Midsummer's conclusion, having accepted and even welcomed the grisly fates of her companions. Crowned May Queen, she embraces this position in the film's final moments, processing her grief and ecstasy in unison while watching her boyfriend burned alive and joining the ranks of the cheerfully murderous Hargans. Number 7, Mia in Evil Dead. The other Fede Alvarez/Jane Levy point that set the horror world alight, Evil Dead resurrected Sam Raimi's classic cabin-in-the-woods comedy horror property in glorious fashion, delivering buckets of terror and gore while remaining true to its roots. Nowhere are these roots more apparent than in the main character Mia and her demonic alter ego. Possessed, or perhaps more accurately infected, early on in the movie, Mia transforms into a cackling, self-mutilating deadite who wants nothing more than to see each of her friends suffer. And she gets her wish. By the film's conclusion, Mia is the only one still standing, following incidents with scalding water, a nail gun, an electric carver. You get the picture. Yes, she's possessed, but there's no denying she causes the deaths of her friends and family, who only even went out to the remote cabin with the conspicuous lack of a phone service to help Mia kick her heroin addiction. This unfortunate series of events ultimately leads to the summoning of the Abomination, a demonic doppelganger whom Mia must tear her own arm off to defeat. Well, at least she'll never do it again. Number 6, Heather in Texas Chainsaw 3D. One of the longest running, if not the longest running horror franchises to date, Universal and Hammer Horrors don't count, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series had planted its feet in every decade and generation since its release. For those not already initiated, yes, this does mean there's a 3D one. Released somewhere between the boom and dying days of contemporary 3D tech, Texas Chainsaw 3D has all the cheap trappings of a 3D horror, but they didn't let that get in the way of a compelling story and characters. What's that? They did? Well, in any case, Texas Chainsaw 3D brings us back to the homestead of the murderous Sawyer clan, right after the events of the first film, showing the townsfolk burning down the house and rescuing a baby. That baby becomes adoptee Heather Miller, who must rediscover her origins in grim detail while being stalked by a Leatherface who is ultimately sympathetic towards her. One act of kindness begets another, and soon Heather is not just the movie's final girl, but a fully paid-up member of the Sawyer clan, setting the big guy on her adoptive parents just for good measure. Number 5. Amanda in Saw 2. Back in Saw's fledgling days, it grew out of the initial premise to deliver a series of creatively brutal traps, underpinned by vaguely moral messages of atonement and appreciation for what we have while we have it. And what we have with Saw 2 is a labyrinth of twisted puzzles and a cast of deeply flawed characters to navigate their way through them. Or not, as the case so often is. Amongst them is Amanda, final girl of the previous entry and apparently a glutton for punishment. She makes it through various levels of the large dilapidated house the film is set in, including a syringe-filled pit, and out the other side with all limbs and parts intact. It isn't until the closing sequence of the film, however, that we discover Amanda's survival is not by chance. She has been working with Jigsaw all along, helping covertly manufacture and direct the events within the house, all in an effort to ensnare and trap corrupt police detective Eric Matthews. A job well done. Pity about the subsequent sequels and Amanda's gradually declining characterization, though. Number 4. Vicky in Terrifier and Terrifier 2. A final girl quite unlike any other for a horror film quite unlike any other. Terrifier's Vicky is left disfigured and, well, terrified by the film's end. Damien Leone's indie slasher sees supernatural serial killer Art the Clown descend upon an old apartment on Halloween night, intent on capturing, mutilating, maiming, and killing a group of young women. Vicky is the only one of them left breathing by the film's conclusion, but not before Art has, amongst other things, eaten her face. The clown is seemingly laid to rest, only to rise again before the credits, and Vicky goes on as the only survivor of a brutal massacre. But much like Saw's Amanda, Terrifier's Vicky lives a dual life beyond her final girl status. With her mind warped by Art, Vicky has become his disciple. Beginning with the mutilation of a talk show host, Vicky embarks on her own modest reign of terror, which weaves its way through Terrifier 2. And at the end of the sequel, she gives birth to the presumed dead clown's living head. Number 3. Tara in Shrooms. Shrooms has by and large been lost in the horror annals, thanks in no small part to its increasing silliness and unmemorable characters, the bane of many a mediocre slasher. The film centres around a group of US college kids who travel to Ireland and go camping out in the woods seeking the trip of their lives. After harvesting a stock of psilocybin mushrooms, they kick back, tell some spooky stories about the local area, and get well and truly shroomed. The end. Well, actually, not quite. Leading girl Tara accidentally noshes down a death bell mushroom and suffers a seizure, which causes her to experience premonitions of future events. Dark and bloody future events. Soon enough, the happy campers start getting picked off, which everyone attributes to a rogue monk from a nearby children's home, star of the group's Campfire Tales. Tara and company are hunted by the mysterious nigh invisible killer until it's just our final girl left, and the paramedics arrive to chopper her away. But there's more. Turns out the death bell mushroom flipped Tara's brain and turned her into the very maniac who did away with her friends. How nobody spotted her sudden sojourns into psychopathy, we may never know. Number 2. Pearl in Pearl. Ty West's thrilling new horror series, the X Trilogy, returns to another dose of blood and nostalgia in Pearl, following up last year's X with a surprisingly welcome prequel. Starring as the titular Pearl, Mia Goth once again takes up her mantle from the first film in the trilogy, in what is in many ways a Technicolor ode to the early 20th century. But Chorus Girl's movie magic and saturated palettes aside, it isn't long before Pearl, a coy farm girl oppressed by her mother's strictness and her father's illness, comes unstuck and starts spraying the landscape with blood. A Lizzie Borden type, Pearl is at once aggressively amoral and piously repentant, and by the time we hit the credits, she has killed every other character in the film. Far from murder for the sake of villainy, however, this chain of events brings upon her quite the moment of reckoning. Pearl winds up alone in a house of rotting corpses, struggling to confront herself and reconcile what she's done, with the film ending on a long shot of her face descending from jubilation to misery. Both final girl and all-consuming psychopath, she lives to tell the tale of the darkness that overcame her, without the power to truly defeat her demons or the wherewithal not to do it again. Number 1. Jess in Triangle. Psychological time travel slasher Triangle is an indie horror masterwork that most people are still sleeping on. Aside from being as generically diverse as its writer-director Christopher Smith is skilled with a pen and a tripod, the film features layers of plot that bend around each other before spiraling into a series of unsettling reveals. And given the topic of this video, it should come as no surprise what the main one is. Melissa George stars as Jess, a young woman who takes a fatal and fatalistic boat trip with friends. Setting out on a dinghy, the gang hit stormy seas and are forced to decamp onto an apparently deserted ocean liner. Once aboard, time goes skew-whiff and a hooded figure begins picking them off, leading to a temporal confusion that Jess finds herself at the heart of. Because the hooded figure is her. Several hers, actually, caught in a time loop from which she believes her only escape is to kill everyone. But we never find out how the loop ends, as the film concludes where it begins. Jess herself dies several times, but is also the only survivor and the killer. Anyone else confused? And that concludes our list. If you think we missed any, then do let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.